Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where in the world you're tuning in from, and welcome to Rise 2021. My name is Amit Mahtaney, and I'm very excited over here to be moderating this panel, where a focus of our discussion is on supplier diversity within the LGBTQ community from both a corporate and an entrepreneurship level. I have with me today Sumesh Suri from Accenture. Hi, Sumesh. How are you?
I am good. Thank you. How are you?
And Erik Dave from Dell. I'm going to sort of pass over to each of you individually, just ask you to give us a quick introduction to yourselves. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll get started on this exciting conversation. So over to you, Sumesh.
Thanks, Amit. Hi, everyone. I've been in the procurement world for almost 25 years now. That's also the total number of years I've spent in the corporate world. So primarily a hardcore procurement sourcing professional. Have got the opportunity to work in the US, China, and in India with multiple different industries. And I currently lead the procurement for India and Sri Lanka for Accenture, which is a very exciting role. And there are a lot of initiatives we are driving for supplier diversity, and I think we'll share some of those with you. So I'll pass it on to Erik.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and hearing our talk today. As they said, my name is Erik Day. I'm the Senior Vice President for Small Business at Dell Technologies. Ultimately, what that means is we are in charge, or my division is in charge of ensuring that small businesses around the globe get the technology they need to allow their businesses to grow and thrive. It's a fantastic job. I think the small business community is the backbone of economies like India's, as well as in the United States. And the technology plays such an essential role there. I've been in the small business arena for the last 6 years of my career. And I'm also one of the most senior 𝘗𝘁𝘏 executives at Dell Technologies. I was a founding member of the Pride Employee Resource Group back in 2001. That employee resource group is now over 20 years old with over 5,000 members globally in over 20 countries and with 30 chapters. And so it's a really amazing conversation to be having this morning with Amit and Sumesh around this intersection between small business and the LGBTQ community. So I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Erik and Sumesh, for that introduction. And to all of you listening in and tuned in, just to introduce myself, as I said earlier, my name is Amit Mahtaney. I am the CEO of a apparel manufacturing company that makes clothes predominantly for the US market globally in multiple countries, as well as a real estate developer and a hospitality owner. So definitely a small entrepreneur, of a jack of all trades, as one would say, and an out and proud member of the LGBTQ community. Also the owner of the Park Hyatt in Chennai, India, which is Hyatt's first pilot hotel for a business resource group targeted at ensuring safe and encouraging practices for the LGBTQ community, and starting to create safe havens and centers for such travelers worldwide, as a company that does so globally. So that's us. I wanted to kind of kick off this conversation with a bit of an open question to both of you, gentlemen, in terms of Sumesh, from your standpoint, from a procurement perspective. You work with a range of vendors. How does sort of Accenture's policy as far as diversity is concerned work? If you could sort of talk about that to begin with, and then I'll throw open a question to Erik as well.
Yeah, sure. So, Amit, at Accenture, diversity and inclusion is something which has been a part and parcel of our world for many decades. In fact, we have a global program called Diverse Supplier Diversity Development Program, DSDP, which was originally launched about 15 years back in the US. And we've launched it in India very recently. And as part of that, we basically include, vendors from different diversity groups, which is PWD, women, and also LGBTIQ. Now we do multiple aspects. One is giving them opportunities, how they can come and provide us their products and services. Secondly, as part of this program, we have chosen about 7 vendors, from the diversity groups, the 3 different categories I highlighted, and they're aligned for 18 months in a structured program with leads from different businesses, including me. And we actually kind of nurture and hone them, and we watch over them. We guide them how they can grow their business, not just within Accenture, but also how they could do that across other industries, working with the big corporates. So given the fact that this is something not new to us, we have developed multiple policies and guidelines around it, and how we can enable vendors from these categories into Accenture. So we provide them a very friendly environment and guide them, while we have vendors who are from the Fortune 1000 and Fortune 1500 categories, but at the same time we provide equal opportunity to all the vendors, and handhold them and make sure that they become successful at our organization.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that sort of insight, Sumesh. Erik, a question for you. At Dell and in your capacity, in your role, you work with a large number of small businesses. What would you say are some of the challenges that businesses face? And it's more a question in terms of how small businesses and entrepreneurs can interact with and get supported by large corporations and corporates such as Dell and yourself. I guess this is more of an economic question than an LGBT related question, but I will tie it back, but to kind of get that conversation started.
And I'll do my best to tie it back as well, because I think it's a fantastic question and one that I get very often. So I think there's 2 parts of being an entrepreneur I think are one of the 2 biggest challenges that I see in the work that I do. The first is clearly around capital. You cannot drive a new business or an idea or even think about growing anything without any money. And I think that is one of the parts of entrepreneurship that I see new entrepreneurs struggle with the most. I think that people take, the idea of maybe I can bootstrap, maybe I can ask friends and families. But now with companies like Dell and other like Accenture and many other companies around the world, as well as a lot of nonprofits that are out there, there are a lot of groups that are out there trying to ensure that they get access to new small businesses, trying to get the capital they need in order to get their businesses successful. How I would tie that back into the LGBTQ+ community is like every other underrepresented minority. I think that access to capital becomes even tougher. I think that there is bias across so many different groups, but entrepreneurship and building a business is definitely an area where there's full of bias as well. It's really important that organizations like Pride Circle and Dell Technologies work together on ways to build programming and build contests and gamification and different things that you can do in order to be able to get that capital to those next big ideas, because the next big ideas are really going to make the world a better place to live in. You just think about what we just went through with COVID and the pandemic, and you just think about how entrepreneurship is just going to blow up, and how these new logistics companies and new healthcare companies and you name it are going to come out of the woodwork. It's going to be up to us to work together as NGOs and big corporates, and making sure that we find out where those ideas are brewing so that we can bring them to life. So that's the first one. The second one, and it's gonna sound a little bit selfish, but the second one is definitely technology. Technology is as important, if not more important, than capital. You cannot build a small business today without it, whether it is app development, whether it is making sure that you have the right technology to do the most quickest and most efficient manufacturing, you name it. There could be a lot of different areas of ways where technology can improve and make your business more productive. Security is a big threat happening to small businesses all over the world. So you have to think about security. And then you also have to make sure that you think about cost. Technology is a fantastic cost saver for small businesses all over the world. And the more new and innovative you are on the technology front, the better cost programming and cost efficiency you can provide around your business, which is so important as you're building a new business. So I think those are the two most critical parts of entrepreneurship. And I think that's two places where I think the LGBTQ community, especially those building new businesses, need that thought, the thought engineering and help in making sure that they're driving their business in the best way that they know how.
Thank you so much for that, Erik. I'm going to sort of, move a little bit off script and throw out a question to both of you and to myself as well, to be honest with you, for the purposes of this discussion, which is in context of India per se, where this conference is based, where Pride Circle is based, and as a sort of society that is now evolving as far as LGBT rights are concerned versus, let's say, you, Erik, who are in the United States, where, I remember personally being in New York City when gay marriage was legalized, and what it was like to be at Stonewall, just physically present for that event, and the excitement to see, Freedom Tower in rainbow colors and things like that. Where do you see the sort of, I know this is a big question. I don't think we're going to be able to answer it in the 20 minutes we have left or the 15 minutes we have left, but where do you see the stumbling blocks as far as why there are such few either LGBT entrepreneurs or members of the community that are willing to come out and embrace their identity in a society like India? And how can we both, as sort of, I guess, individual entrepreneurs leading by example, and the both of you representing large corporate support, create an environment that encourages that? Where do we begin? Is the big question.
Yeah, if you don't mind,
to either of you.
I'll go ahead and start. One of the organizations that I work with in the US is called the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. They are a fantastic resources to up and coming, what we call LGBT BEs, which are business enterprises for the LGBTQ community. I think Pride Circle, and let me tell you, if you think a proud moment in New York City was big when you saw the Freedom Tower lit up, to be, I love India. I love coming. I cannot wait to get on an airplane to come back to India and visit once this is all over. I'll tell you that right now. But when Section 377 was struck down, I will tell you that was one of the best days of my life, and just being in the advocacy work that I'm in, and the way that we started our employee resource group at Dell as an ally group where we now can kind of really get full community members a part of that, I think is huge. But going back to your question, is that organizations like Pride Circle have an opportunity to have parts of their NGO in this type of like Chamber of Commerce environment, to where they can work with big entities like Accenture and like Dell to provide programming and resources for people that are wanting to own their own business. Working with people like you, Amit, who have got that that experience, so that there are electronic resources that up and coming LGBTs can get introduced to, so they can meet people like Amit, so they can get mentoring, so that they can understand from companies like Dell and Accenture, how do they get into supplier diversity programming. It's not easy to get into big, huge corporations as a supplier. And it takes people like me and Amit to kind of get that understanding and those instructions and how do you do that. And it can mean big change. And it really is this kind of blending and coming together of big business and NGOs and entrepreneurs that I really think are going to change the dynamic in India. And so I think that a conversation like this is the start of it. And there's so much opportunity that we can do and resources that we can give. And we need Pride Circle and other NGOs in India to be almost like a venue or almost like a digital hub where we can take these resources and we can get them out to communities in India to give the people resources so they can learn what it takes to actually build these small businesses. So I want to give credit to Pride Circle and to you, Amit, for having this conversation, because now we can take this video even and get it out to those communities, into those angel investors, and to those others that are working in small business communities to make sure that that education gets to the community.
Yeah. I think, Amit, from India's perspective, as we're all aware, I think it's a very new subject, which is getting more and more popular and now being spoken out loud. So I think for me, one of the key things that we need to drive is awareness within large corporates and generally all over. And the reason I say this is because we see this being promoted, big time within our organization. And in fact, we have a team which is the diversity and supplier, the inclusion and diversity team, which basically drives these kind of agendas. Now, as part of that, one is that, we have multiple trainings available internally, which churns the thought process in the right direction. And we constantly drive inclusion, of all such communities and, working closely with them, while they are next to us. I think apart from that, what we are doing is that we are providing them opportunities within our organization. And also we are reaching out to some of our major vendors, right, who are providing their support, at our facilities to actually drive inclusion of, these communities in such communities. And we kind of also discuss it on a regular basis, right, and push them, to help us get more and more inclusion at our place. I mean, we also have a program where we actually take on resources and provide them certain trainings, on the different activities that they could do within Accenture. So there's a complete hire, train, and deploy program, for the LGBTI community that we have. And apart from that, we also kind of try to drive as many resources that we can internally. And one of the things that I see is that, such behavior is only initiated at very large corporates, like Dell, Accenture, and others, right? And when it comes to these smaller businesses who want to be part and parcel of our organization, there are a lot of critical requirements, to empanel a vendor. So that's one area where I've seen that, the smaller organizations need a lot of handholding, right? And a support where we can guide them as to what they have to do. Because clearly, as per the procurement policies, we have to be, we have to treat everyone at the same platform, right? There has to be no bias, irrespective, because that's one major criteria procurement has to drive. So while ensuring that, we are meeting that criteria, how can we yet empower and support these smaller organizations, right, to come and participate? So that's something that we kind of work with them very closely and give them equal opportunities, right? Give them equal opportunities, we guide them. And not only that, within our own organization, we also kind of publicize them, bring them onto calls with the different stakeholders and make them aware of the kind of services they provide. So these are a lot of different initiatives, that I believe, can be picked up. But clearly, I think, the mid-sized organizations in India are not yet even ready, to start thinking on these lines, right? So that's one of the biggest hurdles I see where, smaller organizations, how do they become part of the empanelment process of a major organization? So that gap needs to be bridged.
Yeah, and I mean, just to sort of add my experience as well, Sumesh and Eric, to make this more of a conversation, even for me personally, it was a bit of a struggle of sort of finding the balance, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, being a proud member, an out and proud member of the community, but at the same time, not enforcing my identity as the reason for diversity and inclusion. Sort of you're in a very awkward position because in a culture like India where you say, okay, the boss says so that has to fly. And how do you actually create dialogue and conversation, which creates social change at the end of the day, which creates awareness within individuals, which is what individuals build up, families, individuals build up organizations. I'll just share an experience with you where in terms of my case, hospitality is a very interesting business because most properties owned by managed by large chains like Hyatt, Marriott, Intercontinental, etc., are owned by individual entrepreneurs and developers, such is the case of almost every major international hotel in India, and I happen to own one of them. And it was a sort of hybrid of using the large American corporate programs through things such as what Hyatt calls high pride, and because I happen to be an owner and an entrepreneur that was willing and wanting to sort of be the first place, the first venue that used and brought in these programs, there was a little bit of a synergy. So I think there is definitely going to be, like you said, Sumesh, it's something that at the middle enterprise level is got to be awareness driven. From a procurement standpoint, it obviously is more about equality than anything else, right? It's about equality and opportunity. It's about not being biased. I think what any minority wants is to be able to stand on fair ground, no more, no less. I think, and like you said, Eric, it's conversations like these, representing multiple individuals from different backgrounds and different facets of society that actually start putting the message out there to, who knows, maybe there's an entrepreneur or a middle business owner, a medium-sized business owner that watches this video and says, you know what, I can come out as well, and it's a ripple effect. So, but I also personally believe from experience that medium enterprise or small enterprise, family-owned businesses, which is very much the economic bedrock of a country like India, working in tandem with global inclusion programs is the way we're really going to drive change at a corporate level in this country. So on that note, I wanted to kind of throw the floor open again to both of you for any remarks that you may have or any thoughts you may have on that, and how do we get better, basically?
Well, I do, if you don't mind me interrupting, Amit, I did want to, I don't know if it's going to address exactly the question you wanted, but I wanted to talk about something that I think is so important where India is at in their LGBTQ plus journey, is that community is so incredibly important. And where I have noticed and I'm sure Sumesh has as well, is that when our supplier diversity team gets influenced is when there are almost larger institutions or larger influences at bay, meaning that it was really difficult for our supplier diversity team, even in the US and in other kind of more developed countries, without having an organization like the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce to educate us around how do we get there? How do we find these LGBTs? And I think where India is at in their journey, it's so incredibly important that Amit, you and I know that I sound like a broken record, but Pride Circle and others kind of ensure that there's this community of people that can help educate the big companies as well, because I think that is such an important part of that. And it is going to take some time, right? I mean, like Section 377 just was struck down not even 2 years ago. And so there's still a lot of room to grow and community to be built. And I think it's so incredibly important, and it's going to take leaders like yourself, Amit, and others like you to get together and have these conversations and make sure that the companies know where you're at. Because I think, to Sumesh's earlier point, we do have a lot of desire to diversify our supply chains. We have a lot of desire to ensure that our vendors, our customers look like, and what we build and who we employ look like who we serve as a technology company, and we serve everyone. And so it's really important that we get the members of the community into our organization. And I think it's going to take organization and community and making sure that that this group of entrepreneurs, while it might start small, continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because where we can educate on you all on how our companies work, I think the community, the LGBT community, especially those that are wanting to be entrepreneurs, educate the big companies around the skills and around the value that you all bring to our companies, because I think that's where it becomes really super important.
And Amit, I think one of the areas that probably needs a lot of focus is how does the laws in our country get defined? And while I can't diverge into much details, but you know, we were working on providing insurance support, right? And we had some difficult conversations, you know, with our insurance companies, you know, because the law does not support XYZ, right? And while we have the right intent, we see it in the right manner and we want to drive it, but because you know there's dependency so much on the regulatory requirements, you know, it basically becomes a handicap. So I think a constant focus, you know, to kind of pick up this agenda, you know, and drive it for you know, the new laws to be written for the country would also certainly help you know, thrive this community in every forum at a much higher pace, because I believe a lot of that has to do with also the pace which kind of gets curbed, you know, because organizations like us want to do much more, but we really are not in the best position to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, Sumesh, I think it is a sort of chicken and egg situation, right? At the end of the day, if you look at even 377, there were certain Indian corporates, Indian-based corporates, that were still driving diversity and inclusion programs, that were still openly talking about the LGBTQ issue when 377 was in place. And yes, that legal change, as Erik mentioned, was a huge day, I think, because suddenly, you know, I think the population of the world shifted in terms of the number, the majority of the world was living where now it was legal to be, you know, to practice your sexual orientation, to use the legal terminology. And I think, so it is a bit of a chicken egg situation. I think we, you know, as business leaders, we need to put forth, we need to push, we need to ask questions, you know, whether it's then engaging, like you said, Sumesh, with an international global insurance scheme or program with, let's say, a large corporate like a Liberty Mutual or someone who's present in India, and then say, okay, how do we make this work? And then representation gets made. So I fully agree with you and understand that the laws have to change, but I think society also changes the laws. And Erik, to your point, one of the biggest things is, I mean, I think you're very right, is that what we're talking about is a bit of societal change, and in a country which is very economically driven, where, you know, Sumesh, I'm sure you can attest to this as two Indian men on this call. You know, the culture with which we're brought up, the need for success, the benchmarks with which we're measured as kids growing up, whether it's, you know, school grades to getting jobs to employment to success is corporate success is very much valued even at the home front. And then to sort of say that, you know, it's almost that you go home and you turn around and say that, hey, this company that you wanted me to work for, whether it's Dell, whether it's Accenture, whether it's IBM, is turning around and telling me that there's a support group for you. There's an environment for you in which you can thrive as who you are. My mentor sitting in Chicago is happily married to his partner of 20 years. That's a story you bring home as well. Right? And it's what we sort of look up to societally, which is economic progress and success, that allows large corporates to actually bring changes into individual homes. And I mean, the number of times that I've heard stories of people who've come out, but come in India, but come out first at work, not to friends, not to extended members of family, but to colleagues at work, because that was the environment that was created. And I think, you know, that's one of the big things that large corporate global umbrellas such as the ones that you represent can influence the medium businesses. And then of course at the end of the day, yes, like you said, Eric, I think the single biggest move is entrepreneurs have to come out and own who they are, because that's how you lead by example.
And I think that in some ways, Amit, is the missing piece to this conversation is I think those of you that are watching this talk, those of you that are in big corporates that are trying to figure out how to raise money for new innovative businesses within India, I think this is kind of where we all have to kind of come together and work together so that not only is the corporate space a safe place for the LGBTQ community, but entrepreneurship is safe, right? And working with the big banks. Like I know that my friend Ken is going to do a keynote here at Rise 2021, who is a managing director at JP Morgan. It's having these different elements of the entrepreneurial journey be talking about this issue, so that more and more of the community is okay with being who they are, so that they can talk about how their identity is a big part of their business idea. I really, and again, not being Indian, but something that I love about the Indian culture is this idea of this kind of mom and pop, or this idea of small business being the backbone of India. It really is. It's not only the backbone of India, it's what makes India special. And it takes members of the community to be able to be out and in the community to be able to build some of those businesses so that they can then come out not only as LGBT, but out as larger businesses, and then see that they have a really good idea. And then ultimately, like you have, Amit, whether it's in your clothing company or in your hospitality business, hey, wait a second, I can do this too. And I can be out, and I can then go and talk to these big corporations, and then I can do even more, and then I can get bigger, and then I can sell my company, and then, and then more and more resources come to you. So it is this kind of interesting, what we call in America, snowball effect, where it starts as a little snowball, you push it down the hill, and it becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger snowball. I think it takes all of us to continue to have this conversation and to make sure that people within India continue to feel comfortable, not only wanting to be an entrepreneur, but also wanting to continue to be out about their identity, because that allows us to have more access as corporations.
Well, and Eric, to your point, I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks today is also the fact that at the end of the day, a lot of this medium enterprise that is the economic building block of India is very much family business oriented, which then adds in a whole layer of complexity to the coming out process, because you're actually taking work and family and you're mixing the two. And then, you have entrepreneurs who could be in leadership positions or growing, some by, combination of inheritance and earning it. And then they're worried that they're going to lose their livelihood if they come out, because that boss is also their father or mother or uncle. And so that, I think that adds a lot, where, again, the example of large corporate helps.
Yes.
Because that's very much something that the small medium enterprise of the Indian business culture looks up to. I think it's sort of like the Siliconization or the Silicon Valley coming to Bangalore and Hyderabad and places like Chennai. That's sort of bridge that gap. Now, how do we sort of infiltrate it further? Just kind of throwing the floor open for any closing remarks. Both of you gentlemen would love to hear any thoughts you may have on anything that you think we haven't covered, or because we do have to wrap up soon.
Yeah, so I think certainly we've come a long way. I mean, if you look 10 years back to, the progress that has been made within India, it's tremendous. And yes, it has started with a lot of large corporates, but I think the culture and imbibing, the LGBTI community is now becoming part and parcel of our society. So I think we all need to kind of chip in and do our bit. There are a number of things I personally am trying to drive, for what can be done, for the Pride community. And I'm actually working very closely with Ram on that. But I think we all need to do our bit and see wherever there's an opportunity to kind of promote this and make people more and more aware. I think that's going to help all of us, move towards a more inclusive community.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sumesh. I'm really glad and happy to see how big Rise even has grown. I looked at the agenda and I was just blown away about what Rise has been able to accomplish in just 2 years' time, and how large corporates are really standing up and really trying to take this change that India is going through and blowing it up even greater. And I have to tell you, Amit, in that last conversation we had, you pulled on my heartstrings a little bit, right? To think about how large corporates can be a big part of not only the coming out process, but giving people the encouragement to have really difficult conversations with their families, and those families that are also a part of the business journey, and how many family-owned businesses there are, is really something to think about as people want to think about opening their own businesses. But I do think it is about allyship and working together as nonprofits and as big corporates to be able to continue to have this dialogue, because I think that the future for India is so incredibly bright. And I think there is so much opportunity and so much innovation and so many dynamic things coming out of India, that entrepreneurship is really going to play a big part of that. And it's going to be important for the LGBTQ community to continue to get together and to have these conversations and to build communities around things like entrepreneurship. And how do we use these amazing allies in big corporations to continue to make those entrepreneur dreams come true? Because I think it can very easily turn into reality. And Amit, you being a catalyst of that is going to be important on what can be done. So again, really important conversation. I'm so glad that we were able to have it today. Just to kind of conclude and wrap up this, before saying thank you to you gentlemen, I think just to add my 2 cents, I would say that absolutely, I think it's so critical that we have these conversations. Thank you to Rise, to Ram and his team for sort of giving us this platform, growing it, making it their sort of mission to provide these opportunities. And I think it's very important that both allyship and those of us like you and I, Eric, in positions of leadership are willing to sort of, be out there and be open, share our stories, share our experiences, because it's about humanizing it at the end of the day. And I think, corporates, families, etc., all of them at the end of the day boil down to the human condition and individual experiences and stories. And the more we can personalize this idea of why is inclusivity important, because it impacts people who've gone through a lot of struggle, without reason. So on that note, I just want to say a big thank you to both of you for taking your time to have this conversation with me. It's definitely been a heartwarming experience. We've come a long way and we have a long way to go. So I guess onward and forward. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amit.